The night of 1,000 lanterns has returned once more to the sleepy harbor town of Marrow's End. Every year, when the October wind softens and the last leaves burn gold against the fading light, the townsfolk gather by the shore to set their lanterns afloat. They say the ritual began long before memory, when the sea took more than it ever returned, and the living promised never to forget the dead. The lanterns, some crafted of thin rice paper, others carved from pumpkins hollowed by trembling hands, carry wishes, regrets, and the names of those who vanished into the mist. Tonight, the town sleeps beneath a copper moon, and the air itself seems to hold its breath. You are listening to Midnight Murmurs Radio, and I'm Evelyn Blackwood, guiding you through another bedtime story, a sleep story for those who dream with open eyes. As the world outside your window fades to quiet, allow yourself to settle into stillness. Find a comfortable place, loosen your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and take a slow, steady breath in. Hold it for a moment, and let it go again. Inhale softly, exhale gently. With each breath, let the noise of the day drift further away until all that remains is the distant hum of waves and the soft amber glow of 1,000 lanterns floating across dark water. Somewhere, a violin sighs from a porch unseen. The melody wavers, fragile and slow, like an old soul remembering. The cobblestone streets of Marrow's End glimmer with candlelight, reflections quivering in puddles left by an afternoon rain. Children, dressed in worn capes and hand-stitched masks, chase after flickers of light, their laughter echoing between shuttered shops. Above them, the wooden sign of the mariners sways gently, its letters half-faded but still proud. Inside, an old man polishes a single glass that no one has ordered from in years. His eyes, grey as the harbor mist, drift to the window where lanterns rise like tiny suns toward the horizon. He murmurs something under his breath, perhaps a name, perhaps a prayer. The candle beside him gutters, though no wind passes through. Every town has its stories, and every story has a beginning that refuses to stay buried. The legend of the lanterns tells of a night when the veil between worlds thins, when voices lost to time whisper once more. They say this sea remembers, and so does Marrow's End. The first lantern was said to belong to a woman named Eliza Wren, a widow who waited each Halloween for her husband to return from a voyage that never ended. Her lantern, made of pale paper and sealed with a kiss, was the first to vanish into the tide, and the first to be seen again, drifting back to shore at dawn, untouched by flame or water. Since then, every soul who has ever vanished near the bay is said to return this night, following the light that bears their name. Tonight, as you breathe slowly, let yourself walk those same narrow streets. Feel the chill in the air, the soft press of fog around your shoulders, the faint scent of salt and smoke. Imagine the lanterns bobbing gently across the water, each one a heartbeat in the dark. Somewhere among them, a single flame burns brighter than the rest, a lantern larger, older, its frame carved from driftwood and glass, etched with forgotten runes. No one in Marrow's End remembers making it, yet it appears every year. They call it the Awakening Light. And if you look closely, just as the clock strikes midnight, you might see a figure standing by the pier, a woman in black, her hands clasped around that ancient lantern, her eyes reflecting 1,000 small suns. The townsfolk never speak to her. They say she is only seen when the world begins to remember what it should have forgotten. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The sea will keep the secrets for now. The lanterns will burn until dawn, and when morning comes, only their ashes will remain scattered across the tide, like dreams dissolving in light. Asterisk. The tide was rising slow and silver when Evelyn noticed it one lantern that refused to drift, while all others sailed obediently into the dark, swaying toward the horizon like stars reborn. This one lingered near the pier, its light pulsing softly, as though it breathed. She had come to Marrow's end as a visitor, not a believer, drawn by stories too strange to ignore. The townsfolk said the night of 1,000 lanterns was a comfort, not a curse, but as Evelyn stood among them, watching the candlelight tremble across the bay, she could feel something beneath the calm hush that wasn't peace, but waiting. The wind carried the scent of salt and something older, something almost sweet, like lilac, left too long on a grave. She drew her coat tighter and stepped closer to the edge of the pier. The water whispered against the wood. The lantern that lingered was smaller than most, shaped from weathered paper, yellowed with time. Its flame flickered blue at the edges, the way a flame does when memory burns instead of wax. She knelt, curious, reaching out to steady it, but before her fingers could touch, the lantern drifted an inch backward, as though it had felt her hesitation. The movement was too deliberate, too alive. From behind her, the faint creak of boots on wood made her turn. It was the old man from the Mariner's Inn, the one with the grey eyes and the silence carved into his face. He said nothing for a while, only stood beside her, watching the strange light tremble between them. "Some lanterns? Esa y that last voice rough light rope. Don't belong to the living." Evelyn waited, the sea breathing below. "Whose is it?" she asked softly, the old man's lips pressed thin. "Eliza Wren's." "The first, hers, always comes back." The name sank into the night like a stone through water. "I thought her lantern was lost." "It was," he murmured, "until the sea gave it back. It does that sometimes, returns what shouldn't be found." He looked at her then, eyes reflecting that same blue flame. "The sea remembers everything." The words lingered, as if the wind itself was repeating them. Somewhere distant, a bell tolled from the old church tower, though no service had been held there for years. The sound rippled across the harbor, slow and heavy, and with each chime, more lanterns seemed to waver in their course. Some turned back, some circled aimlessly, and from far beyond the pier, Evelyn could swear she saw shapes moving beneath the water, faint, glimmering, as if the sea were full of drifting silhouettes walking just below the surface. Her breath caught. "Is this part of the festival?" The old man didn't answer. His gaze had drifted toward the horizon, where mist was gathering, thick and low, rolling toward shore, like a tide of ghosts. "It's beginning," he said, barely above a whisper. "The night remembers." Evelyn tried to follow his eyes, but the fog had swallowed everything. Only the soft glow of the stranded lantern remained, painting her hands in blue. Then, from within that flickering light, she heard it, a faint hum, almost like the sigh of a woman's voice carried through glass. She leaned closer. The lantern pulsed once, twice, then steadied, the flame brightening. For a heartbeat, she saw something inside letters. Written on parchment, ink faded, but legible enough to make out one word, return. Before she could react, a sudden gust swept over the water, and the lantern extinguished without a sound. Darkness rippled. Outward, the sea stilled, unnaturally so, and in that stillness, Evelyn heard footsteps behind her again, slow, deliberate, coming closer along the pier. She turned quickly, but no one was there. Only the faint echo of boots on wet wood, receding into the fog. The old man was gone. The shore was empty. The laughter of the townsfolk had faded as though pulled into another world. All that remained was the quiet and the scent of extinguished flame. She took a trembling breath, whispering to no one. Eliza Wren. The name felt strange on her tongue, like speaking it might wake something, and perhaps it did, because at that very moment a single lantern on the horizon flared brighter than the moon, bursting into a bloom of gold that lit the mist from within. For an instant, Evelyn saw faces dozens of tame. Emerging from the light, their eyes open but unseeing, their mouths moving in silent chorus. Then the glow dimmed, and the sea swallowed their reflection whole. Somewhere behind her, the violin began to play again, but slower this time, almost mournful, as though it too had remembered. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The sea is calm for now, but not silent. But not the night has begun to awaken. By the time Evelyn stepped off the pier, Marrow's End no longer looked quite the same. The fog had crept inland, curling between the cottages and lantern strings like a living thing. The laughter that once danced through the streets now came in strange waves, distant and hollow, as if echoing from another time. She could still hear the violin, that lonely tune drifting through the haze, but instead of one melody, there were two intertwining. One played by the living, the other by the memory of someone long gone. The cobblestones gleamed wet under her boots, reflecting a world painted in gold and shadow. The shop windows flickered with candlelight, though no figures moved inside. When she passed the bakery, the scent of fresh bread filled the air, impossibly warm, impossibly alive. But the sign above the door, its paint, cracked and faded, bore the date 1883. Evelyn stopped. She knew that name. She had seen that year etched on the gravestones near the churchyard earlier that morning. Her pulse slowed, caught between fear and fascination. She looked around. The streets, once lined with electric lamps, now glowed only with the soft light of oil lanterns. The voices of townsfolk, faint and lilting, drifted past her ears in a language of old New England phrasing, words rounded with accents that had long since vanished from modern speech. Somewhere, a woman called out to a child, "Jonas, stay close to the light," and the name vanished into the mist as quickly as it came. Evelyn followed the music toward the square. There, the heart of the festival burned brighter than ever. Hundreds of lanterns hung from trees and wooden poles, their flames swaying like small hearts. Beneath them, people danced slowly, solemnly in circles around a great bonfire that reached for the stars. Their faces glowed with reverence, their eyes reflecting a deep, timeless sorrow. At the center of it all, stood a tall woman in a black cloak, her hair silver as frost, holding a lantern larger than any other. Its light was that same haunting blue. Evelyn's breath caught. The woman didn't move like the others. She stood still, gaze fixed toward the harbor, her lips moving in quiet incantation. The old man's words echoed in Evelyn's mind. Some lanterns don't belong to the living. She took a step closer, the crowd shifting around her as if she were invisible. No one turned, no one saw her. The air thickened with the scent of smoke and lilac again, stronger now, almost suffocating. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she brushed against one of the dancers. The woman's hand was cold, the kind of cold that didn't belong to flesh. The woman kept dancing, her eyes vacant, her smile serene. It was then Evelyn realized this was no longer the Marrow's end of tonight, but the one from the past. The veil between worlds had not only thinned, it had folded, letting one night bleed into another. She stood in the same place as before, but in a different time entirely. The violins stopped. Silence fell so suddenly it was deafening. The woman in black turned, slowly, her eyes meeting Evelyn's. For an instant, Evelyn saw her own reflection inside those eyes, flickering like a candle trapped in glass. "You shouldn't be here," the woman whispered, voice soft, yet echoing in every corner of the square. Evelyn opened her mouth, but the words refused to come. The woman lifted her lantern. Its blue light spilled across the cobblestones, illuminating faces that weren't there a heartbeat ago. Men in sailor coats, women with veils, children clutching carved pumpkins, all translucent, all watching her. "The living forgot," the woman said, "but the sea remembers. Tonight, we awaken not to frighten, but to be seen." The light dimmed, and Evelyn felt the air shift again. The crowd began to fade, one by one, dissolving into dust and mist. Only the woman in black remained, her lantern now glowing faintly gold instead of blue. She stepped closer and placed the lantern in Evelyn's hands. "Carry it," she whispered. "When dawn comes, let it go, or it will follow you." Then, like a sigh, she vanished. The bonfire flickered once and went out. The fog unraveled, retreating toward the shore, and when Evelyn blinked, the square was empty again save for her, the cold lantern, and the faint shimmer of morning beginning to touch the horizon. She stood there for a long moment, heart still, breath slow, unsure if she had dreamt it all. But when she looked down, she saw the faint outline of a handprint on the glass, delicate, burned into it like memory itself. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The lanterns are quiet now, their flames resting until another night. But somewhere beneath the calm surface of the sea, 1,000 forgotten names wait to be spoken again. The old inn was silent when Evelyn returned, the lantern still glowing faintly in her hands. Its light was softer now, golden at the edges, no longer cold but strangely alive, like the pulse of something remembering warmth for the first time in centuries. The door creaked as she entered. The air inside smelled of cedar, candle wax, and the faint salt of the sea that clung to everything in Marrow's End. She placed the lantern gently on the wooden desk by the window, where moonlight still pooled like liquid glass. The sea outside was calm again, a smooth mirror of pale silver. Only a few distant lanterns still floated, their reflections trembling with each slow wave. Evelyn sat in the quiet, letting her breath match the rhythm of the tide. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream, the dance, the faces, the woman in black. But then the lantern flickered once, and a thin wisp of smoke curled from its frame. Something shifted inside. She leaned closer, careful not to disturb the fragile glow, and noticed what looked like folded parchment pressed against the inner glass. Her fingers brushed. The metal rim. It was warm to the touch, impossibly so for an object that had burned without wax or oil. The lid resisted when she tried to open it, sealed by age and something else, something that didn't belong to time. With a small exhale, she whispered, "Elisa Wren," and the lock gave way with a soft sigh, as though the lantern itself had been waiting for her to say the name. Inside lay a letter, edges curled and brown, sealed with crimson wax, stamped in the shape of a single feather. She hesitated, then broke the seal. The paper crackled softly, and as she unfolded it, a faint scent of lilac filled the room again. The ink had faded, but the handwriting was elegant, graceful loops, deliberate strokes, the kind of penmanship that carried sorrow in its symmetry. "To whoever finds this light," the letter began, "know that it was not born from joy, but from grief. My name is Elisa Wren, and tonight I light the sea for the last time. My husband, Captain Samuel Wren, was taken by the waters that feed this town. They told me he drowned when his ship went down in the storm of '83, but I have seen the truth in my dreams. The sea keeps what it loves, and what it loves, it does not release." Evelyn's throat tightened. She read on, the candle beside her trembling. "Each year the town sends lanterns to remember, but they do not know that remembrance is a door. Every flame, every name whispered into the tide calls to the depths. I thought I could call him back. I thought love was stronger than death. Primera ua es wrong." The next lines were shakier, blotched with tears that had long since dried. "If the lantern finds you, beware its light. It carries what the sea remembers. Do not look into it when it turns blue. Do not follow the voices that rise with the fog, for the sea does not forget, and neither do the dead." Evelyn's hands trembled. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. Outside, the wind began to stir again, brushing against the window with a hollow, rhythmic sound, like fingers tapping glass. "Say, look, up, up." In the reflection of the window, she saw herself on behind her, for just an instant, a shadow of a woman standing by the lantern, her outline shimmering like mist caught in candlelight. Evelyn turned, heart pounding. But the room was empty. The lantern's glow had turned faintly blue. The letter slipped from her hand and fell to the floor, its edges curling as though touched by invisible heat. From inside the lantern came a whisper, soft, sorrowful, like a voice carried through the tide. It wasn't words at first, only the sound of longing. Then it grew clearer until Evelyn could almost make out her name. Evelyn. The voice was distant, fragile, as though spoken through water. "Help. Help me." She stumbled backward, breath quickening. The voice came again, softer now. He never returned. The light flared once, and Evelyn saw the faint image of a ship torn sails, a stormy horizon, lightning frozen in the distance reflected inside the glass. The sound of waves filled the room, though the sea was far below. She reached out, trembling, her fingertips brushing the lantern's rim. For a heartbeat, she saw her reflection replaced by another, a woman's face, pale and luminous, eyes wide with grief. Eliza Wren. Then the flame dimmed, and everything went still again. Evelyn sank into the chair, her pulse slowing, her thoughts dissolving into the rhythm of the wind. The letter lay at her feet, one line now faintly glowing, as though written anew. When dawn comes, return it to the sea. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The night outside is calm again, but within its silence, the sea is listening, and the lantern is waiting for its return. Somewhere beyond the mist, the air had turned golden, as though the night itself had taken a slow breath and exhaled centuries of memories. The 1,000 lanterns swayed above the cobblestone streets, their soft glow revealing faces both familiar and strange. Evelyn walked among them, her steps slow, as though afraid to disturb the air. Every window she passed seemed to hold a reflection that wasn't quite her own, a flicker of someone else, someone who once lived here long before her time. The old man who had spoken of the festival's curse was gone, but his voice lingered, woven into the rustle of maple leaves that trembled under the autumn wind. She followed the faint melody of a harp carried from the square, a tune too fragile for the living, too sad for the dead. It drew her toward the heart of the town, an ancient well surrounded by Muscovite stones. Around it, the lanterns hung lower, as if bowing. This is where they gathered. The wind seemed to whisper, this is where the promise was made. Evelyn knelt beside the well, tracing her fingers along the rim. The stone was cold, slick with dew, but beneath her touch pulsed a faint warmth, as if something beneath still breathed. And then a reflection appeared on the water's surface, not hers, but a young woman with pale hair tied in ribbons and eyes full of grief. The figure spoke softly, though no sound reached Evelyn's ears. The movement of her lips formed words Evelyn somehow understood. Find the keeper. When she blinked, the image vanished, leaving ripples spreading into the dark. From the edge of the square, a silhouette emerged, tall, cloaked in black, carrying a staff adorned with a single flickering lantern. His presence bent the air, made the flames of nearby candles lean toward him as if drawn by an unseen tide. He stopped before Evelyn and spoke in a voice like wind through hollow wood. You should not be here after the 10th bell, he said. The lanterns do not burn for the living tonight. Evelyn steadied her breath. You're the keeper, she said. The man tilted his head slightly. His face was hidden, but beneath the hood she glimpsed the faint shimmer of eyes reflecting 1,000 tiny lights. That name hasn't been spoken aloud in 100 years. He raised the lantern between them. Inside, the flame pulsed like a heartbeat. This festival began as a remembrance, a promise that no soul would wander alone. But promises fade, and when they do, the forgotten come to reclaim what was once theirs. The wind grew colder. The sound of laughter from the street softened into murmurs. Evelyn felt the world contract, the boundary between dream and reality thinning like old silk. "You mean the spirits?" she whispered. The keeper nodded once. "They awaken when the living forget." He turned, motioning for her to follow. They walked through the lantern-lit square, past shops that hadn't opened in decades, and houses that seemed to breathe faintly as they passed. "Each lantern," the keeper continued, "holds a fragment of someone's memory. A kindness, a sorrow, a promise made before the end. When the light fades, so too does their peace." They stopped before an old clock tower that loomed over the town, its bell frozen "There," he said, pointing to the base of the tower, "is where the first lantern was lit, and where the last one will go out." Evelyn could see it, a small stone altar surrounded by wax and petals, a single lantern still unlit. The flame inside it flickered weakly, as if waiting for something or someone. The keeper set his own lantern beside it, and for a moment the two lights pulsed together, twin heartbeats in the dark. "Someone must remember them," he sighed softly, "or the town will fade with them." Evelyn felt a tremor beneath her feet. Not of fear, but of recognition. The names on the lanterns, the faces in the glass, the songs in the wind. They weren't strangers. They were pieces of every life ever lived here. Echoes of the same heartbeat that had guided her to this night. She looked back at the keeper, his lantern dimming. "And if I remember?" "Say," asked it. He turned toward her, his face half in shadow, half in light. "Then you will keep the promise," he whispered. "But it will cost you your dreams." The bells above them began to toll. Slow, deep, endless. The lanterns flickered all at once, their glow trembling like breath. Evelyn closed her eyes and exhaled. The sound of the 10th bell faded into silence, and somewhere in that silence, the world held its breath, waiting. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The 10th bell sounded slowly, a deep vibration that rolled across Marrow's end, sinking into cobblestones and rising with the fog like the pulse of the town itself. Evelyn felt it in her chest first, a resonance that seemed to echo the rhythm of the lanterns, as if each flame carried a heartbeat linked to the toll. The streets, quiet moments before, now murmured with life that was not entirely living. Shadows stretched unnaturally, moving against the wind, and whispers of voices long forgotten threaded through the night air, brushing against her ears like silk on skin. She tightened her grip on the lantern in her hands, its glow now steadier, warmer, yet still pulsing as if alive, responsive to the rhythm of the 10th bell. Behind her, the keeper remained, his hooded eyes reflecting countless points of light, and though he said nothing, Evelyn felt his presence anchor her to the moment, a guide through what was awakening. From the harbor, the mist thickened, curling around moored boats and rooftops, carrying with it the soft scent of lilac and salt. Within it, shapes began to coalesce. Figures clad in fashions long vanished, faces pale, eyes luminous, lips whispering names and half-forgotten promises. The townsfolk, both living and spectral, intertwined seamlessly in the square. Some danced slowly to the invisible music, while others knelt, lighting new lanterns that appeared from nowhere, each flame bright and trembling with its own secret story. Evelyn noticed that the blue light she had first seen pulsing in the lanterns now multiplied across the square, creating a constellation of tiny stars hovering just above the cobblestones. One by one, she recognized the faces reflected in them. Sailors lost to storms, children claimed by accidents, and women who had wandered the streets in past centuries, waiting to be remembered. The keeper motioned toward the old clock tower. "The 10th bell opens the veil," he said. "Tonight, the past and present walk together, and the forgotten are seen." Evelyn followed his gaze upward, where the tower's hands were frozen mid-swing. Yet, despite the frozen time, a luminous door appeared at the base, not carved into stone, but shimmering in the air, like liquid silver. Through it, she could glimpse events from the past. The first lantern lighting centuries ago. Sailors bidding farewell under stormy skies. A woman with pale hair whispering to the sea, her eyes wide with grief. The lanterns in her hands trembled, reflecting these moments back at her, as if asking her to bear witness. A hush fell across the square, heavy and complete. Even the wind stilled, and for a heartbeat, all sound ceased, except the faint pulse of the lanterns. Evelyn heard the voice again, the one she had first glimpsed from the pier. "Remember us," it whispered, carried on the faintest thread of air. She turned, seeing the townsfolk now frozen mid-step, half living, half remembered. Each lantern shone with a story, each flame a fragment of memory, some joyous, some mournful, all aching with a desire to be acknowledged. She realized then that the ritual was not only for the dead, but for the living, too. To forget would be to sever a line of continuity. To honor the dead meant embracing the weight of memory, accepting sorrow alongside beauty. The keeper lifted his lantern once more, and all the lights surged upward in a wave, 1,000 flames merging into a golden river that floated toward the moon, each pulse timed to the echo of the 10th bell. Evelyn felt a warmth envelop her, hentle bat, insistent, like a tide lifting her spirit. The faces around her smiled faintly, whispering thanks, their forms dissolving slowly into the mist as the lanterns rose. She stepped toward the shimmering doorway at the clock tower, compelled by a mixture of awe and duty. The lantern in her hands flared, brighter than she thought possible, and the letters on its surface glimmered. "Return what you hold." She exhaled slowly, stepping through the door just as the 10th bell's resonance faded into silence, leaving behind a calm deeper than any she had felt before. In that stillness, she understood. The festival was awakening not in terror, not in spectacle, but in remembrance, in the reverent dance of lives lived and lost. She felt the pulse of every lantern, every soul, flowing together in harmony. And as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The night has awakened, the lanterns will rest, and the memories carried within them will wait patiently until another year, until another light is needed, and until the sea remembers once again. The morning after the 10th bell was unlike any other in Marrow's End. A pale mist lingered over the harbor, soft and unyielding, as though reluctant to let go of the night's secrets. The town appeared ordinary at first, Glen's cobblestones glistening with dew, windows fogged over, and lanterns extinguished but still warm to the touch. Yet Evelyn felt the residue of the night pressing against her skin, the echo of voices and the pulse of lantern flames lingering in the corners of her mind. She walked slowly down the streets, past the Mariners' Inn, where the scent of cedar and salt still clung to the walls. The letter from Eliza Wren had returned to her hands, its ink faded but legible, carrying whispers of grief and longing. The town was quiet, almost reverent, as if the living themselves were holding their breath in the presence of history. Evelyn paused at the old clock tower, now silent, its door closed and stone unchanged. Yet she knew, from the pulse in her chest, from the faint shimmer still dancing across her lantern, that the events of last night had not fully ended. The veil between worlds had thinned, leaving memories to drift freely, unseen by those who had forgotten how to look. She moved toward the square, where remnants of lanterns swayed gently in the wind, tiny flames flickering as though breathing. Here and there, she saw traces of shapes, half-perceived figures, outlines of sailors, women, and children, caught in moments long past. Their eyes, though translucent, seemed to recognize her, drawing her attention toward the oldest part of the harbor, where driftwood and Muscovite stones told stories of shipwrecks and long-forgotten departure. Evelyn knelt beside the remnants of an old boat, its timbers splintered but still solid, and traced her fingers along its grain. The sea lapped softly, whispering against the hull with voices she could almost understand. "They wait," a voice said, though no one stood near. It was soft, melodic, carried on the breeze another fragment of last night. The keeper's warning echoed in her memory. The sea remembers, and so do the dead. Her eyes followed the curve of the harbor, noticing faint ripples that moved with purpose. Shapes began to emerge, not fully solid, but visible enough to feel their presence. A young girl stepped from the mist, holding a miniature lantern, her eyes wide with wonder and something Evelyn recognized as sorrow. She raised it toward Evelyn, and for an instant, their gazes locked, bridging centuries of longing. The girl's lips moved silently, forming words Evelyn could feel rather than hear. "Find the heart of the lanterns." Evelyn exhaled slowly, letting her hand rest over the glowing blue flame within her own lantern. It pulsed gently, a heartbeat syncing with hers, guiding her gaze toward the center of the square. There, beneath the skeletal branches of an ancient maple, she noticed a circle of stones arranged with deliberate care, their surfaces etched with names and dates that spanned generations. Each stone bore the weight of a story ships lost at sea, children taken too soon, women whose grief had never faded. The lanterns that remained hovered above these stones, flickering in quiet reverence, their flames tiny suns illuminating the etchings. Evelyn stepped forward, kneeling before the circle. She placed her lantern in the center, feeling the warmth of its light spreading beneath her palms, mingling with the cold, damp stone. The pulse intensified, and she realized she could see faint outlines of figures beneath the stones themselves, souls anchored by remembrance, waiting to be acknowledged. The girl appeared again, and this time more shapes followed, emerging from the mist. Men in sailor coats, women in lace, children with carved pumpkins at their feet, each one gliding silently toward the center. Drawn to the glow of Evelyn's lantern, she understood. The festival was not merely a celebration. It was a ritual of reunion, a weaving of past and present, alive in the pulse of the light. The keeper's words returned to her consciousness. Someone must remember them. Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed deeply, allowing the stories embedded in the stones, the lanterns, and the mist to flow into her. Each heartbeat of the lantern brought whispers of history, echoes of lives intertwined with the sea, the wind, and the town itself. The mist thickened, curling around her like a protective shroud, and for a moment she felt lifted, as if walking among the memories themselves. Names, faces, moments of joy and sorrow, all brushed past her consciousness, weaving into a tapestry of light. When she opened her eyes, the square had grown fuller, the lanterns brighter, yet the air remained serene. The dead and the living existed together in delicate balance, bound by the remembrance that the festival demanded. Evelyn exhaled slowly. She knew she had stepped beyond simple curiosity. She had become a guardian, a keeper of stories, a witness to those who had been forgotten. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The town rests beneath the lingering mist. The lanterns pulse softly, and the echoes of those who came before wait patiently, knowing that someone remembers. Evelyn followed the mist-laden streets deeper into Marrow's End, the lantern in her hands pulsing softly, its light a quiet guide through the lingering fog. The town seemed to lean closer to her as she passed, every shuttered window and wooden sign breathing stories she could almost touch. She arrived at the edge of the harbor where the old boathouse stood, its timbers bleached by years of wind and salt, and pushed open the creaking door. Inside, dust floated in the slivers of morning light, catching the glow of her lantern and scattering it like gold dust across the wooden floor. In the center of the room sat an old chest, wrought iron hinges, rusted the wood, etched with symbols that seemed to shift as she gazed upon them. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, revealing a single lantern, smaller than the rest, its paper walls fragile and inked with faded blue patterns. She recognized it immediately. The same lantern whose pulse had drawn her through the streets the previous night. A folded letter lay beneath it, sealed with crimson wax, and as she lifted, a faint scent of lilac filled the room. Stronger than ever, she broke the seal, reading the first lines slowly, savoring each carefully penned word. To the one who finds this light, know that you carry not just illumination, but responsibility. I am Eliza Wren, and it was I who lit the first lantern. What you see now is not merely tradition. It is a covenant, a remembrance of the lives lost to the sea and the storms of time. Each flame born thereafter carries part of my grief, part of my opie, and a fragment of those we have loved and lost. Evelyn's hands shook slightly. The lantern's flame flickered as if acknowledging the letter, its pulse stronger, almost sentient. She read on, tracing each looped letter, each inked word carefully. When my husband disappeared, I lit the first lantern with the hope that he might find his way back to me. But the sea does not forgive, nor does it forget. Each year, we light thousands more to remember, not just him, but all who were lost, all who wandered and were forgotten. The ritual binds the living to the memory of the dead, and when it fails, when remembrance falters, The dead reach out, restless, seeking acknowledgement. Evelyn exhaled slowly, letting the words sink into her mind. She could feel the truth in them, the pulse of the lantern, the way the air seemed heavier with memory, the faint echoes of footsteps and laughter, not entirely of the present. Outside the boathouse, a soft hum began, like a vibration through the boards and the mist, almost musical. She looked up and saw faint, translucent figures moving just beyond the window women, with ribbons in their hair, sailors with wet coats, children clutching small lanterns each, drawn to the pulse of the first lantern as if it were a beacon. The letter continued. Know that the lantern is alive in its own way. It carries more than light. It carries the essence of those we remember. Should it be broken or neglected, the covenant falters, and those who are forgotten wander until someone lights the flame again. It is a cycle of memory and life, a pact with the past and with the sea itself. Evelyn's heart beat in rhythm with the lantern, and she felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw the keeper, who'd drawn low, eyes reflecting the soft golden flame. You have found it, a sighed softly voiced like wind through hollow wood. The first lantern. It will show you what the festival has always protected and what it demands. She stepped forward, holding the fragile paper and the glowing lantern in tandem. What does it demand of me? Say, asketh. The keeper lifted his staff, and the faint light traced patterns in the air, like ghostly constellations. That you remember, and that you honor. The festival is not merely celebration, it is recognition, acknowledgement of the lives that shaped this town, whose stories might otherwise vanish. You carry the first lantern now. It will guide you through the night and through the truth of the past. Outside, the mist thickened again, curling around the boathouse, as if protective. The figures Evelyn had glimpsed through the windows lingered longer, their forms sharper, their eyes now resting upon her. The lantern's pulse grew stronger, almost insistent, leading her toward the center of the harbor where the stone circle awaited. The keeper's voice was a whisper now, blending with the hum of the water. Every lantern after this one is a story, but the first is the covenant itself. Guardeth, and you guard all who have been forgotten. Fail, and the town will bear the weight of those memories in unrest, wandering until the cycle is fulfilled. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the lantern, feeling its warmth seep into her bones, and for the first time she understood the enormity of what she carried. The festival was alive not in spectacle, not in revelry, but in the remembrance, in the pulse of memory, in the bridge between the living and the departed. And as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The lantern waits, the town breathes, and the past lingers softly, watching, remembering, and trusting someone still carries the flame. The harbor was quieter now, the early morning fog still clinging to the edges of the piers, soft and persistent. Evelyn's lantern pulsed faintly in her hands, its warmth a comfort against the chill of the damp air. As she walked toward the square, shapes began to emerge from the mist, faint silhouettes of figures, their edges hazy, as though painted from smoke. At first, she thought them tricks of the light, illusions of her own imagination, but then one stepped closer. A young sailor with eyes full of longing, a lantern clutched in trembling hands. He reached out, not touching her, yet she felt a pull, a tug at the very core of memory and time. She followed him through winding streets, past buildings she had walked by countless times, though now they seemed different, older, more alive with history. Each brick and shutter echoing the footsteps of those long departed. The square opened before her, where hundreds of lanterns had once floated, their flames now dim and waiting. And there, amidst the lingering mist, the figures gathered, women in flowing dresses, children clutching small pumpkins, men in sailor coats, all drawn toward her lantern. She realized, with a shiver, that they were not hostile. They were expectant, patient, bound to the rhythm of remembrance. The keeper appeared at the edge of the square, his hooded gaze sweeping over the gathering. "They seek acknowledgement," he murmured, voice blending with the whisper of leaves and distant water. "Not vengeance, not fear. They only ask to be seen." Evelyn stepped forward into the circle of mist, the lantern guiding her like a pulse of light in the gray dawn. One of the children, a small girl with ribbons in her hair, approached, her translucent hand brushing against the mist in greeting. She pointed toward the clock tower, where shadows pooled unnaturally at the base, and then toward the oldest houses lining the square. The lantern in Evelyn's hands pulsed brighter, as if answering. She understood that each figure, each shade, was leading her to a story, fragments of lives that had touched the town, left it, and remained tethered to memory, following them. She passed an abandoned bakery where flour still dusted the floor in faint outlines of long-gone hands kneading dough, and a tailor's shop where mannequins held the shapes of forgotten garments, each a testament to a life once lived. The mist thickened, curling around the lantern's glow, and the whispers grew clearer, forming words almost intelligible. "Remember, remember, remember," they intoned, soft yet insistent. Evelyn's pulse quickened, but her steps remained steady, guided by instinct more than thought. She realized that the festival was more than a tradition. It was a map of remembrance, each spirit a marker pointing toward the hidden truths of Marrow's end. At the center of the town, beneath a canopy of skeletal maples, the oldest lantern stood larger, its flame dormant yet expectant. Around it, the mist formed shapes that hinted at faces she had glimpsed before. Sailors, lost to storms, children whose laughter had been silenced by tragedy, women waiting for their loved ones to return. Evelyn knelt before it, feeling the pulse of her own lantern merge with the unlit one, a heartbeat sinking across centuries. The keeper's voice rose again, carried by the wind. "They remember what we cannot. You must guide them, illuminate the forgotten paths, and honor each story." The night watches and the lanterns respond only to those who bear truth in their hearts. Evelyn exhaled slowly, placing her lantern beside the unlit one. The blue flame shimmered, flickered, then ignited fully, spilling light across the mist, revealing the faces and forms of the spirits who had been waiting. They smiled faintly, whispers of gratitude brushing against her ears, and for a moment the square was filled with warmth. Despite the chill of morning, shadows intertwined with the light, forming bridges between centuries, between the living and the remembered. A delicate dance that pulsed with quiet magic. The lanterns above seemed to lean closer, their flames reflecting in the water and on the damp cobblestones, binding the town to its own history, to the covenant of remembrance Eliza Wren had begun. And as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The spirits rest for now, the lanterns glow softly, and the town waits patiently for another night when memory and light shall meet again. The mist thickened as Evelyn wandered deeper into the heart of Marrow's End, guided by the pulsing flame of the first lantern. Each step seemed to echo across centuries, the cobblestones beneath her feet carrying the weight of countless untold stories. She reached the outskirts of the oldest district, where time itself seemed reluctant to move, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and faded lilacs. There, she noticed a narrow alley she had never seen before, shrouded in shadows that shifted with the lantern's light. Something tugged at her attention, a faint glow from the end of the alley, bluish, fragile, as if holding a memory that refused to fade. Evelyn approached cautiously, the lantern steady in her hands, and discovered a small, weathered door, its hinges rusted and wood-warped by years of neglect. Symbols etched into its frame mirrored those she had seen on the first lantern. She hesitated, heart thudding, before pushing it open. The room beyond was dim, dust motes swirling like tiny stars in the beam of her lantern. At the center stood a pedestal, and upon it rested an old journal, bound in cracked leather and sealed with the same crimson wax she had seen on Eliza Wren's letter. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she lifted it, feeling a pull, a gravity that drew her into the past. The journal opened easily, pages brittle, yet intact. The handwriting was unmistakable. Eliza Wren's flowing script, looping letters carrying sorrow and urgency. October 31st, 1883. Tonight, I light the lantern for the first time. Samuel is gone, claimed by the storm and the merciless sea. I cannot bring him back, but I can call others to remember, to honor those who have been lost. The lantern is a bridge, a promise that no soul will wander alone, yet I feel a fear I cannot name. Evelyn's breath caught. The next passage detailed the events that had become legend. How Eliza had lit the first lantern, how the townsfolk had gathered to watch its flame dance across the waters, and how, as the last lantern was placed on the pier, Eliza had vanished. No trace remained, not even footprints in the sand, only the lantern's faint pulse that night, and every year thereafter. A shiver ran through Evelyn as she realized the truth. The first lantern was not merely a symbol of remembrance, it was a tether, a vessel containing Eliza's own spirit, bound to the ritual she had begun. As Evelyn read, the room grew colder, the shadows lengthening unnaturally. A soft sigh echoed through the chamber, like wind through hollow timbers, and she felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw a translucent figure, pale, graceful, eyes wide with longing and fear. Eliza Wren herself, standing just beyond the lantern's glow. You carry it," the ghost whispered, voice barely more than a ripple. Evelyn nodded, speechless. "The lantern," Eliza continued, "binds me and those like me. It was not meant to trap, but to remember. But if it is neglected, if the flame dies, then I am lost again." Evelyn stepped closer, heart beating with awe and trepidation. "I will, honor, italiano." "I promise," she said, and the lantern pulsed brighter, a soft heartbeat in the darkness. Eliza's form flickered, becoming more solid, yet still fragile as fog. She gestured toward the journal, urging Evelyn to read on. The pages revealed details, long hidden. The first Halloween ceremony. The names of every soul whose memory had been captured in the lanterns, and a warning that any who failed to carry remembrance forward would face nights haunted by echoes of the forgotten. Outside, the wind rose suddenly, carrying whispers from the square, faint fragments of the previous night, the voices of children, sailors, and women, now fully realized as spirits drawn toward the pulse of memory. Evelyn felt the responsibility weigh upon her, the enormity of the ritual pressing against her chest. The keeper appeared once more, his hood casting long shadows, eyes reflecting the flicker of the lantern's light. "Tonight you begin what Eliza could not complete alone," he said. "The festival is more than celebration. It is vigilance. Every year, every lantern, every story must be remembered, or the town will carry unrest for generations. You are now its guardian." Evelyn exhaled slowly, placing the lantern gently upon the pedestal. The blue flame flared, casting dancing shadows on the walls and revealing the delicate outline of Eliza's smile, faint yet reassuring. The room seemed to breathe with her, alive with history and memory, as the spirit of the first lantern pulsed steadily, a heartbeat, anchoring the living and the dead. And as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The town rests beneath lingering mists. The lanterns glow softly, and Eliza Wren waits patient, trusting that her covenant will continue through those who remember. The evening air had settled into a gentle hush, carrying the faint scent of burning leaves and salt from the distant harbor. Evelyn walked slowly, lantern in hand, feeling the pulse of the flame echo in her chest. Around her, the mist thickened, weaving through the streets like liquid memory, and from it, soft outlines began to emerge, figures that moved with a grace that seemed at once human and ethereal. They were the spirits she had glimpsed before. Sailors, children, women in dresses of lace and ribbons, all drawn toward her lantern, their translucent hands gesturing, guiding, beckoning. Evelyn followed, careful not to rush, letting the rhythm of their movement carry her through the winding streets of Marrow's End. The first destination revealed itself quietly. The old cemetery on the hill, where time-worn headstones leaned against one another, moss and ivy wrapping them in a green shroud. The spirits paused at the gates, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of her lantern, waiting for her to step forward. She did, and the ground seemed to breathe beneath her feet, faint pulses of memory rising through the soil. Each headstone told a story, etched with names and dates that spanned centuries, lives that had shaped the town yet were at risk of being forgotten. The lantern's pulse grew stronger as she moved among them, the soft light brushing over weathered inscriptions, revealing faint traces of personal history, a sailor's coat torn by storms, a child's handprint pressed into stone, a mother's whispered prayer lingering in the air. Beyond the cemetery, the spirits led her to the edge of the forest, where the trees stretched tall, skeletal branches reaching into the misted sky. Here, the air shifted, cooler and heavier, and a faint hum echoed through the woods, blending with the distant sound of the waves. Evelyn walked carefully, lantern held high, and glimpsed a small clearing where remnants of past celebrations lingered. Discarded lanterns, faded ribbons, and carved pumpkins with soft blue flames flickering faintly, as if remembering the hands that had made them. The spirits circled her, forming a protective ring, their presence both comforting and strange, reminding her of the delicate balance between the living and those who had passed. In the center of the clearing stood a pedestal, similar to the one where the first lantern rested, now empty yet expecting. The keeper's words echoed in her mind. Every lantern carries a story, every flame a fragment of remembrance. Evelyn knelt, placing her lantern in the center. The pulse of its flame surged, illuminating the mist, revealing the faces of spirits hovering beyond faces of those who had been lost, wandering in shadow. Now anchored by the light she held, each pulse seemed to whisper secrets of the past. A sailor who had never returned from the sea, a child separated from family by fate, a woman who had lit her own lantern in hope, only to vanish before the flame could fully burn. Evelyn listened, heart heavy yet calm, letting the lantern carry the weight of their stories. The mist swirled around her, and faint figures moved closer, leaning toward the light, their eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. Through the veil of fog, she saw the clock tower in the distance, its hands frozen mid-swing, yet a faint glow at its base signaled that more remained hidden, waiting for her. The spirits moved onward, and she followed, guided by the rhythm of their pulse and the unwavering glow of the first lantern. Along the path, glimpses of the town's history emerged. A tavern where songs of sailors had echoed for decades. A marketplace where children's laughter once rang. The old boathouse where Eliza Wren had lit the first lantern. Each location held fragments of memory, faint yet alive, stitched together by the pulse of the lantern and the spirit's patient guidance. Evelyn understood that this wandering was part of her journey, that she was being taught to see what others could not, to honor, to remember, to carry forward the covenant began long ago. The lantern in her hands pulsed brighter with every step, syncing with her heartbeat, and she felt the presence of the spirits surrounding her, neither threatening nor fearful, but insistent in their silent demand. Remember us. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The spirits rest for now. The lanterns glow softly, and Marrow's ends waits patiently, holding its secrets, its stories, and the memories of those who came before. Night had fully settled over Marrow's End, the town cloaked in the gentle embrace of mist and shadows. The pulse of the first lantern in Evelyn's hands guided her toward the town square, where lanterns from previous nights floated silently, their soft glow reflected in puddles left by the dew. The spirits she had followed through the streets gathered once more, forming a silent, expectant circle around the square. Children, sailors, women in flowing dresses, all drawn by the rhythm of remembrance, stood in fragile outlines, each one tethered by the memory that the lantern carried. The keeper appeared beside her, his hooded figure blending into the shadows, staff in eyes reflecting the shimmer of countless flames. Tonight, the festival reaches its apex. he whispered, voice carrying over the hushed square. The lanterns awaken not merely to celebrate, but to remember, to bind the living with the past. You are its guardian now. Evelyn nodded, feeling the weight of her responsibility settle like a soft cloak around her shoulders. The lantern in her hands pulled stronger, casting a golden light that stretched across the mist, illuminating the stone circle at the center of the square. Slowly, the other lanterns joined in, their flames flickering and merging into a river of gentle, shimmering light. From the edges of the square, a soft hum rose, harmonizing with the pulse of the lanterns. It was the song of remembrance, of lives lived and lost, of moments frozen in time yet alive in memory. Evelyn stepped into the circle, holding the lantern high. The mist thickened and swirled, wrapping around the assembled spirits, who now hovered closer, their faces luminous with gratitude and longing. She could feel their stories converging into the light. A sailor lost to a storm, a child taken by illness, women whose grief had lingered for decades. The lantern's pulse quickened, responding to her heartbeat, connecting her to every soul present. And then, as the clock tower struck midnight, the final moment arrived. From Tamist, a larger glow emerged, the spectral form of Elisa Wren, radiant yet fragile, her eyes wide with relief. She extended her hands toward Evelyn, acknowledging the fulfillment of the covenant. "You have carried the light," she whispered, voice like wind through the leaves. "The festival is preserved, and the forgotten are remembered." The square seemed to exhale, the tension of centuries melting into warmth. The lanterns rose higher, their light spilling over the rooftops, reflecting in windows and puddles alike, until the entire town seemed bathed in gentle luminescence. Evelyn felt a sense of completion, a harmony that settled deep within her chest, linking her pulse with the rhythm of the lanterns and the spirit's silent gratitude. One by one, the spirits began to drift away, returning to the places they had once loved, yet leaving behind a lingering sense of presence, a reassurance that memory endures. The keeper nodded once, a faint smile visible beneath his hood, and then faded into shadow. Evelyn remained in the square a moment longer, letting the lantern's warmth soak into her bones. She understood now. Halloween in Marrow's End was not merely a night of celebration, of masks and revelry, but a sacred dance of memory, remembrance, and light, binding the living to the past in a ritual older than the town itself. Slowly, she lowered the lantern, placing it gently on the stone pedestal at the center of the circle. The pulse softened, a heartbeat fading into calm, the mist settling into quiet serenity. The town was at rest, the spirits at peace, and the night held its secrets in gentle embrace. And as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The lanterns steam softly, the memories rest within Marrow's End, and the festival sleeps, waiting patiently for the next year when its lights will awaken once more, guiding the living and honoring the forgotten.